University student knocks on the door of her own apartment to collect rent money from her tenants, and she never walks out alive. What makes this case even more tragic is that Loretta Saunders dedicates her final months to studying the very crisis that claims her life, the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women in Canada. The arrest that follows reveals a chilling video recorded days before the murder, where her killers actually discuss their plan to take her life.
Are you hungry?
Stop it!
Are you hungry?
Wait for me.
Are you hungry?
You can't even say that you really want to kill Loretta.
Really?
And you said that you want to kill her earlier.
When did I say that?
Don't lie about who I want to kill, and maybe you should stop lying.
Who do you want to kill then?
You're the one who said,
You
"Oh, I want to
you
kill
just
Loretta.
you just said
she comes back
you're
here."
okay.
On August 25, 1987, Loretta Barbara Grace Saunders enters the world in Happy Valley Goose Bay, Newfoundland, and Labrador. Her parents, Miriam Teriak and Clayton Saunders, raised Loretta and her siblings in the tight-knit Inuk community of Labrador. Friends and family describe Loretta as warm, compassionate, and fiercely intelligent. She possesses an infectious laugh that lights up every room she enters. Her determination shows early. When life knocks her down, she always finds a way to get back up. Loretta's path to success doesn't come easy. After experiencing trauma during her teenage years, she drops out of high school and moves to Montreal, where she lives on the streets and battles substance abuse. But Loretta recognizes the dangerous path she walks. She watches how Indigenous women on those streets face violence and exploitation every single day. This observation plants a seed that eventually grows into her life's mission. Loretta makes the difficult decision to return home to Labrador. She enrolls back in school, completes her high school diploma, and applies to St. Mary's University in Halifax, Nova Scotia. When her acceptance letter arrives, her family celebrates. Loretta becomes the first in her immediate family to pursue higher education. She tells everyone she plans to attend law school after graduation. At St. Mary's, Loretta pursues a criminology degree and begins research for her honours thesis on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada. By early 2014, the 26-year-old Loretta lives in Halifax with her boyfriend of 2.5 years, Yalcin Circulte. She discovers she's 3 months pregnant. The couple begins planning for their future together. To make ends meet while completing her thesis, Loretta decides to sublet a room in her apartment at 41 Cowie Hill Road to 2 people she barely knows, Blake Leggette and Victoria Henneberry. It's a decision that costs her everything. January 2014 marks a fresh start for Loretta Saunders. She moves in with her boyfriend Yalcin and begins her final semester at St. Mary's University. Her thesis supervisor, Dr. Daryl LaRue, consistently praises her dedication and brilliance. But there's a problem. Her graduate funding application for the research project gets denied. Loretta needs money to cover her expenses while she completes her work. She makes what seems like a practical decision. Her apartment at 41 Cowie Hill Road sits empty while she lives with Yalcin. Why not rent it out? January, Loretta meets Blake Leggette, 25, and his girlfriend Victoria Henneberry, 28. The couple desperately needs a place to stay. Loretta agrees to sublet a room to them for $430 per month. It seems straightforward enough, but almost immediately, problems surface. Leggette and Henneberry struggle financially. They fall behind on rent. Loretta remains patient at first. She understands money troubles. She sends text messages asking for payment. She gives them extensions. Yet weeks pass without a single dollar. By early February, the situation reaches a breaking point. Loretta owes her own rent and bills. The couple owes her $430, and they show no signs of paying. She makes the decision every landlord eventually faces with problem tenants. They need to leave. On February 8, 2014, something disturbing happens inside the apartment at 41 Cowie Hill Road. Victoria Henneberry picks up her cell phone and starts recording. What she captures chills investigators to their core when they discover it months later. Blake Leggette and Victoria argue, and Leggette chases Henneberry around the apartment with his smartphone running. During this heated exchange, they discuss killing Loretta Saunders. In the video, Victoria tells Blake, "You can't even say that you really want to kill Loretta. You said that you really want to kill her earlier today." 5 days later, their words become reality. February 13th, 2014, starts as an ordinary Thursday for Loretta. She wakes up at Yalcin's place, feeling optimistic despite the stress of her thesis work and the tenant situation. She needs to handle the Cowie Hill Road problem today. Around mid-morning, Loretta sends a text message to Victoria Henneberry and Blake Leggette. She tells them she's coming to the apartment. She wants the rent money they owe her. If they can't pay, she plans to evict them. At approximately 11 a.m., Loretta arrives at 41 Cowie Hill Road. Security cameras mounted in the apartment building capture her walking through the entrance. She wears casual clothes and carries her purse. Nothing about her demeanor suggests concern or fear. She simply looks like someone handling routine business. The footage shows Loretta heading toward the elevator. She takes the elevator up to her apartment. She knocks on the door. Blake Leggette and Victoria Henneberry let her inside. What happens next unfolds according to a plan the couple devises during the morning hours. They don't have the $430 rent money. They don't have any money at all, and they certainly don't want to leave Halifax. So they create an alternative solution, a horrifying one. Victoria sits with Loretta in the living room. She starts telling Loretta a story about losing her bank card. She needs to call the bank, she explains. This conversation serves a single purpose. It keeps Loretta seated on the couch, distracted and vulnerable. Blake Leggette positions himself behind Loretta. Then he strikes. Before we continue with what happened that afternoon, hit that subscribe button if you want to see justice served in cases like this. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? Blake grabs Loretta by the throat from behind. His hands close around her neck as he begins choking her. Loretta immediately fights back. She's young, strong, and fighting for her life and her unborn child. The struggle moves from the couch to the dining room floor. Loretta scratches and claws, trying desperately to break free from his grip. Blake reaches for plastic bags. He attempts to suffocate Loretta by placing a bag over her head. She tears through it. He grabs another bag. She rips through that one too. A third bag. She breaks through it as well. Loretta fights through 4 separate plastic bags, refusing to give up. But Blake Leggette weighs more and possesses greater physical strength. As Loretta weakens from the strangulation and lack of oxygen, he slams her head repeatedly against the floor. The brutal impacts finally stop her movements. Blake wraps her face in plastic wrap to ensure she stops breathing. Loretta Saunders dies on the floor of her own apartment. She's 26 years old and 3 months pregnant. The couple doesn't call police. They don't show remorse. Instead, they execute the rest of their plan. Blake stuffs Loretta's body into a hockey bag. He cleans the apartment, wiping away evidence of the struggle. Victoria assists in the cover-up, but they need money first. They leave the apartment with Loretta's body still inside, taking a computer to return to a store for cash. They come back later in the afternoon. Blake and Victoria carry the heavy hockey bag to the elevator, ride down to the main floor, and exit the building. Security cameras capture them moving through the lobby, but the footage doesn't clearly show what they're carrying. They place the hockey bag containing Loretta's body into the trunk of her own vehicle, a blue 2000 Toyota Celica. They take her car keys, her bank cards, her identification, and her cell phone. Then Blake Leggette gets behind the wheel of Loretta's car, and Victoria Henneberry slides into the passenger seat. They drive away from Halifax, leaving behind Loretta's life, her dreams, her unborn child, and her groundbreaking research that might have saved other Indigenous women's lives. For the next several hours, Loretta's boyfriend Yalcin and her family have no idea anything went wrong. Loretta's phone remains active. text messages arrive from her number. But Loretta isn't sending them. Blake and Victoria use her phone to deceive everyone who loves her. What investigators discover in the coming days reveals a crime so calculated and callous that it shocks even veteran homicide detectives. February 14th, 2014, Valentine's Day, brings the first signs that something is terribly wrong. Loretta's sister Delilah receives a strange text message from Loretta's phone. It contains just one word: "Hey." The message feels off. Loretta typically writes longer, more personal texts. Delilah tries calling back multiple times. No answer. That same day, Yalcin Circulte receives an equally bizarre message from Loretta's number. The sender asks about Loretta's mother's maiden name, the kind of security question used for accessing bank accounts. Yalcin immediately becomes suspicious. Why would Loretta need to ask him this? She knows her own mother's maiden name. He tries calling her repeatedly throughout the day and evening. Every call goes straight to voicemail. February 15th and 16 pass with complete silence. Loretta doesn't contact anyone. She doesn't show up to class. She doesn't meet with her thesis advisor. Friends try reaching her on social media. Nothing. For a woman who stays in constant communication with her family and maintains an active academic schedule, this absence screams danger. On February 17th, 2014, Loretta's worried family contacts Halifax Regional Police to file a missing person report. Officers take down the basic information: 26-year-old pregnant woman, last seen on February 13th, hasn't contacted family or boyfriend in 4 days. The case gets assigned to investigators who begin standard missing person protocols. Police visit the apartment building at 41 Cowie Hill Road. They pull security footage from February 13th. The video shows Loretta arriving at the building at 11:01 a.m., walking through the lobby and heading toward the elevator. She appears calm and unhurried, but there's no footage showing her leaving. Police canvass the building, knocking on doors and interviewing neighbors. Nobody reports seeing or hearing anything unusual on February 13th. Detectives focus their attention on Blake Leggette and Victoria Henneberry, Loretta's tenants and the last people known to have contact with her. They need to locate this couple immediately. Officers check the apartment at Cowie Hill Road. Empty. Leggette and Henneberry vanished. Then comes a critical break. On February 18th, 2014, police in Harrow, Ontario, a small town near Windsor, close to the American border, make a discovery. They locate Blake Leggette and Victoria Henneberry staying at a friend's house, and parked right outside sits Loretta's distinctive blue 2000 Toyota Celica. Halifax Regional Police dispatch detectives to Ontario. When officers search the vehicle and question the couple, they find Loretta's bank cards, her identification, her cell phone, and various personal belongings. Leggette and Henneberry can't provide a reasonable explanation for possessing these items. They claim Loretta loaned them the car and gave them permission to use her bank cards. Police arrest both suspects on February 18th, 2014. The initial charges remain relatively minor: theft under $5,000 for taking Loretta's possessions. Both suspects are remanded into custody, but investigators know this case involves far more than simple theft. A pregnant woman doesn't voluntarily give away her car, phone, and bank cards, then disappear without contacting anyone. Detective teams work around the clock, analyzing the evidence. They examine Loretta's bank records. The statements show transactions made with her debit card after February 13th, purchases at gas stations, convenience stores, and restaurants along the route from Halifax to Ontario. Security footage from a Tim Hortons location captures Blake Leggette behind the wheel of Loretta's Toyota, using her bank card with the tap-and-go feature to pay for purchases. But where is Loretta herself? Investigators broaden their search parameters. They study maps and timelines, calculating how far someone could travel from Halifax in several days. They contact police departments in New Brunswick, the province between Nova Scotia and Ontario. Search teams prepare to cover hundreds of miles of highway. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police joins the investigation, coordinating multi-jurisdictional efforts. February 26, 2014, brings the devastating answer everyone dreads. A driver notices something unusual in the median along Route 2 of the Trans-Canada Highway, west of Salisbury, New Brunswick. The snow-covered median sits approximately 200 kilometers from Halifax. The driver contacts police. RCMP officers arrive at the location. They find a hockey bag partially concealed in a thin patch of woods within the highway median. When they open the bag, they discover the body of Loretta Saunders. She's been dead for nearly 2 weeks, her body exposed to winter weather. Medical examiners transport her remains for autopsy. The Halifax Regional Police immediately announce they're upgrading their investigation to a homicide case. On February 27, 2014, prosecutors in Ontario modify the charges against Blake Leggette and Victoria Henneberry. Both now face first-degree murder charges, 1 count each. First-degree murder in Canada indicates planning and deliberation, suggesting prosecutors believe this killing was premeditated rather than spontaneous. The autopsy reveals critical information about Loretta's final moments. The medical examiner determines she died from asphyxiation, lack of oxygen to the brain. Evidence shows manual strangulation, attempted suffocation, and blunt force trauma to her head. The examination confirms Loretta was approximately 3 months pregnant at the time of her death. The violence she endured was prolonged and brutal, indicating she fought desperately for survival. Forensic teams return to the apartment at 41 Cowie Hill Road. They process every inch of the space, looking for blood evidence, DNA, fingerprints, and signs of struggle. Despite Blake Leggette's cleaning attempts, investigators find traces of biological evidence. Luminol reveals blood patterns consistent with a violent struggle in the living room and dining room areas. Meanwhile, digital forensics experts examine the couple's phones and electronic devices seized during their arrest. What they discover on Victoria Henneberry's phone stops everyone cold. The video recorded on February 8, 2014, shows Blake Leggette chasing Victoria around the apartment with his phone. During this argument, they clearly discuss their plan to murder Loretta. Victoria's words, "You can't even say that you really want to kill Loretta. You said that you really want to kill her earlier today," provide prosecutors with evidence of premeditation. Investigators also find written materials. While incarcerated in the Tulsa County Jail awaiting trial, Blake Leggette writes 35 pages of handwritten notes. Guards discover these pages hidden inside toilet paper rolls in his cell. One page bears the title, "People I Would Like to Be Mentioned in the Book." Other entries reference getting a book deal on the go and spinning the story into gold. Blake Leggette apparently envisions profiting from the murder through media deals. The evidence against Blake Leggette and Victoria Henneberry mounts quickly. Prosecutors prepare for trial, organizing hundreds of pieces of evidence. Security footage showing Loretta entering the building but never leaving. Video of Leggette driving Loretta's car and using her bank card. The February 8th cell phone video discussing the murder plan. Text messages sent from Loretta's phone after her death, DNA and forensic evidence from the apartment autopsy results showing cause of death. Leggette's handwritten notes about the crime. Both defendants enter not guilty pleas. Their lawyers begin building defense strategies for what promises to be a sensational trial. Jury selection becomes scheduled for April 2015. The case attracts national attention across Canada, particularly within Indigenous communities, who see Loretta's murder as emblematic of the broader crisis she dedicated her life to studying. Loretta's family struggles with overwhelming grief. Not only do they mourn their beloved daughter and sister, but they also grapple with the cruel irony. Loretta researched missing and murdered Indigenous women, and now she becomes another statistic in the very tragedy she hoped to help solve. On March 8, 2014, International Women's Day, the small community of Happy Valley Goose Bay holds a funeral service for Loretta. Hundreds attend to honor her memory. St. Mary's University hosts a memorial service on campus where faculty and students celebrate her academic achievements and advocacy work. And that's when the case takes an unexpected turn that no one anticipates. Between February 2014 and April 2015, the case against Blake Leggette and Victoria Henneberry moves through the Canadian legal system. But this isn't a cold case that takes years to solve. Investigators identified their suspects within days. Instead, this becomes a story about justice delayed by legal procedures, evidence preparation, and the mounting pressure on both defendants as their trial date approaches. March and April 2014 bring intense media scrutiny. Canadian news outlets cover every development in the case. What captures public attention most powerfully is the tragic irony of Loretta's death. Here's a brilliant young Indigenous woman studying the epidemic of violence against Indigenous women and girls, and she becomes a victim of that very violence. Her story forces uncomfortable conversations across Canada about systemic failures to protect Indigenous women. Loretta's mother, Miriam Saunders, speaks publicly about her daughter. She describes Loretta's warmth, intelligence, and determination to make the world better. But Miriam also notices something disturbing in how media initially covers the case. Early reports describe a missing white woman from Halifax. Police apparently assume Loretta is white based on her physical appearance. Loretta possesses fair skin, light hair, and blue eyes, features that make some people perceive her as white rather than Indigenous. Miriam later testifies that this misidentification affects how police treat her family. When they said she was a white woman, I would call the investigators, and they would answer to me, and I would talk personally to the investigators, Miriam explains. And after, when they started calling her Inuk, I had to start swearing and everything to get answers. This revelation exposes a harsh reality. Even in death, Indigenous women face discrimination based on how Indigenous they appear. Loretta's case receives intensive media coverage and rapid police action, partially because investigators initially think she's white. When her Indigenous identity becomes clear, family members notice a shift in communication and urgency. The case sparks broader activism. Loretta's cousin, Holly Jarrett, launches the Ami Next campaign in response to Loretta's murder and the August 2014 death of 15-year-old Tina Fontaine, an Anishinaabe teenager found in a river in Winnipeg. The hashtag spreads across Canadian social media as Indigenous women and girls share their fears, experiences, and demands for justice. The campaign directly challenges the Canadian government to take action on missing and murdered Indigenous women. At this time, Prime Minister Stephen Harper's Conservative government resists calls for a national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Harper controversially states, "I think we should not view this as a sociological phenomenon." His comments generate fierce backlash from Indigenous communities and advocacy groups. The Ami Next campaign intensifies pressure on the government. Meanwhile, prosecutors prepare their case against Leggette and Henneberry. The legal process moves through several stages. A preliminary inquiry takes place in summer 2014, where evidence gets presented to determine if sufficient grounds exist for a trial. Both defendants sit through days of testimony. The judge rules that yes, enough evidence exists to proceed with a murder trial. Throughout this period, Blake Leggette and Victoria Henneberry remain incarcerated. Neither receives bail. They sit in separate facilities and their relationship deteriorates under the pressure. Victoria begins distancing herself from Blake, suggesting he acted as the primary aggressor while she played a more passive role. Defense attorneys face a monumental challenge. The evidence against their clients overwhelms any reasonable doubt strategy. Security footage, cell phone records, text messages, the February 8 video, Blake's handwritten notes, possession of Loretta's car and belongings, each piece forms part of an airtight case. Defense lawyers know their clients' chances at trial look grim, but prosecutors face challenges too. They charge both defendants with first-degree murder, which requires proving planning and deliberation. The February 8 video clearly shows premeditation. However, defense attorneys argue that discussing something 5 days earlier doesn't constitute the immediate planning necessary for first-degree murder. They suggest the killing might have been spontaneous, an argument that erupted over the rent money, not a calculated murder. Loretta's family endures a painful waiting period. They want justice, but the legal system moves slowly. Every court date, every delay, every procedural motion extends their suffering. Loretta Saunders, Loretta's sister, channels her grief into activism. She starts a blog titled A Homicide Survivor's Journey Through Grief in September 2014, just 7 months after losing Loretta. In her blog, Delilah writes openly about the trauma of losing her sister. "Loretta was my best friend. She was my other half," she explains. "We didn't hide anything from each other." Delilah struggles with alcohol abuse in the immediate aftermath, but eventually commits to sobriety and advocacy work. She vows to continue Loretta's mission of raising awareness about violence against Indigenous women. The case also affects St. Mary's University. Faculty and students established the Loretta Saunders Community Scholarship Fund in 2014, created in partnership with the Community Foundation of Nova Scotia. The scholarship supports Indigenous students pursuing higher education, exactly the path Loretta blazed during her short life. Dr. Darryl LaRue, Loretta's thesis supervisor, helps organize the fund. He remembers Loretta as one of the brightest students he ever taught. As 2014 turns into 2015, jury selection for the trial gets scheduled. Prosecutors finalize their witness list and evidence presentation. They plan to call Loretta's family members, investigating officers, forensic experts, and the medical examiner. They prepare to show the jury security footage, cell phone videos, bank records, and text messages. The trial threatens to become a media spectacle, with reporters from across Canada preparing to cover every moment. Defense attorneys meet repeatedly with their clients. They discuss possible plea deals. Prosecutors offer some options, but both sides remain far apart on terms. Blake Leggett's lawyer, Terry Shepherd, spends considerable time counseling his client about the strength of evidence against him. Victoria Henneberry's defense team explores whether she might qualify for lesser charges, given her arguably more peripheral role. People like Blake Leggette and Victoria Henneberry count on silence to cover their evil. Show them your voice stands for justice. Type "Justice for Loretta Saunders" in the comments and hit that like button. March 2015 brings final trial preparations. The court selects a jury pool. Prosecutors and defense attorneys conduct voir dire, questioning potential jurors to ensure impartiality. The process takes days. Finally, a jury gets seated. Everyone prepares for opening statements scheduled for mid-April. But something shifts behind the scenes. Both defendants realize the overwhelming evidence means conviction is nearly certain. They watch jury selection and understand these 12 people will likely find them guilty. The question becomes not whether they'll face prison, but for how long. Blake Leggette discusses options with his lawyer Terry Shepherd. Since Monday of trial week, they talk about the possibility of pleading guilty. "He's been thinking for a long time now about this day and about this trial," Shepherd later tells reporters. "It's been weighing on him since February 13, 2014. Victoria Henneberry conducts similar conversations with her defense team. She faces a critical choice: proceed to trial and likely receive the harshest possible sentence, or plead guilty and potentially secure more lenient terms. The prosecutors present another factor to consider. If the case goes to trial, Loretta's family must sit through weeks of testimony. They'll hear every horrific detail of her final moments. They'll see photographs of the crime scene and autopsy. They'll relive their trauma in the most public way possible. A guilty plea could spare the family this additional suffering. April 22, 2015 arrives. The day opening statements should begin. The courtroom fills with media representatives, Loretta's family members who traveled from Labrador, and members of the public. Everyone expects jury selection to continue or opening statements to commence. Instead, what happens shocks the entire courtroom. Blake Leggette stands first. His lawyer addresses Justice Josh Arnold. Leggette changes his plea from not guilty to guilty, but not just guilty to murder, guilty to first-degree murder, the charge carrying an automatic life sentence with no possibility of parole for 25 years. The courtroom erupts in gasps and murmurs. Then Victoria Henneberry rises. She also changes her plea, though to second-degree murder rather than first-degree. Second-degree murder still carries a life sentence, but allows parole eligibility after 10 years. The judge must confirm both defendants enter their pleas freely, without coercion, and fully understanding the consequences. Justice Arnold questions each defendant carefully. He ensures they comprehend what they're admitting. Both confirm they make this choice willingly. No one forces them. They understand the sentences they face. Terry Shepherd later explains his client's reasoning. He did not want to have the Saunders family go through the very grueling process of a public trial, with all of that evidence coming out over the next 4 weeks. But the guilty pleas don't mean the case ends immediately. Both defendants must now provide agreed statements of facts, detailed written accounts of exactly what happened. These documents become critical for the sentencing phase scheduled for the following week. And when those statements of facts get read aloud in court, the full horror of what Loretta endured finally becomes public record. April 22, 2015 transforms from a day of anticipated trial drama into a day of unexpected resolution. After Blake Leggette and Victoria Henneberry enter their guilty pleas, prosecutors present the agreed statements of facts. These documents, negotiated between defense attorneys and prosecutors, lay out precisely what happened on February 13, 2014. The courtroom sits in heavy silence as officials read Blake Leggette's statement first. The document confirms what investigators suspected all along. By early February 2014, Leggette and Henneberry owe Loretta $430 in rent. They don't have the money, they don't want to leave Halifax, and they certainly don't want to face eviction and homelessness. So Blake Leggette devises a plan. He decides to kill Loretta Saunders, steal her car, take her money, and flee the province with Victoria. The premeditation becomes undeniable through the statement. This isn't a spontaneous fight that escalates tragically. This is calculated murder for financial gain and convenience. The statement details February 13, 2014, minute by minute. When Loretta arrives at the apartment around 11 a.m., she expects a simple conversation about rent or eviction. She doesn't anticipate violence. Why would she? These are people she tried to help by providing housing. Victoria's role in the murder becomes clear through both statements. She serves as the distraction. She sits with Loretta in the living room, spinning a false story about losing her bank card and needing to call the bank. This conversation keeps Loretta seated on the couch, her attention focused on Victoria's made-up problem. Meanwhile, Blake positions himself behind Loretta. The statement describes how he creeps up without warning and grabs her by the throat. He begins choking her immediately. Loretta reacts instantly, fighting with every ounce of strength she possesses. She knows she's fighting for both her life and her unborn child's life. The struggle moves from the couch to the dining room floor. Loretta scratches, kicks and claws at Blake, trying desperately to break his grip. Blake reaches for plastic bags, the kind people use for groceries or trash. He attempts to place a bag over Loretta's head to suffocate her. The statement reveals Loretta's incredible will to survive. She tears through the first bag. Blake grabs a second bag. She rips through that one too. A third bag. She breaks through it as well. The statement mentions she destroys 4 separate plastic bags before her strength finally wanes. As Loretta weakens from lack of oxygen and the sustained attack, Blake resorts to more brutal methods. The statement confirms he repeatedly slams her head against the floor. These blunt force impacts, combined with strangulation and suffocation attempts, eventually stop Loretta's resistance. Blake then wraps her face in plastic wrap to ensure she stops breathing completely. Loretta Saunders dies on the floor. The medical examiner later determines she was conscious and fighting for several minutes during the attack. She knew exactly what was happening. She tried everything to survive, but against a larger, stronger attacker who possessed murderous intent, she ultimately couldn't prevail. The statement continues with the cover-up. Blake stuffs Loretta's body into a hockey bag, the kind used for sports equipment. He cleans the apartment, attempting to remove blood and evidence of the struggle. Victoria assists in these efforts. Neither shows any documented remorse or hesitation, but they face a practical problem. They need cash immediately. So they leave the apartment with Loretta's body still inside. They take a computer to return to a store for a refund. When they receive the money, they return to the apartment. Blake and Victoria then transport the hockey bag containing Loretta's body down the elevator to the main floor. They carry it out to Loretta's blue Toyota Celica and place it in the trunk. Before we get to the sentencing that concluded this case, share this video with someone who follows true crime. Stories like Loretta Saunders's need to be heard. Also, drop a comment. What's the weather like where you are? They take Loretta's car keys, bank cards, identification, and cell phone. Blake gets behind the wheel. Victoria rides in the passenger seat. They drive out of Halifax, heading toward New Brunswick and eventually Ontario. Their plan involves fleeing to another province, possibly even crossing into the United States. But they have a body in the trunk. They need to dispose of it. The statement reveals they drive approximately 200 kilometers from Halifax before stopping along Route 2 of the Trans-Canada Highway near Salisbury, New Brunswick. They pull over at the median. Blake removes the hockey bag from the trunk and drags it into a thin patch of woods. He leaves Loretta's body there, partially concealed but ultimately discoverable. Then they drive away. Victoria Henneberry's agreed statement of facts presents similar information, but emphasizes Blake's role as the primary aggressor. Her statement admits she knew about the plan to kill Loretta beforehand. She acknowledges deliberately distracting Loretta so Blake could attack from behind. She confesses to helping dispose of the body and participating in the cover-up. However, her statement characterizes her as following Blake's lead rather than initiating violence herself. This distinction matters legally. Blake's admission of planning and executing the murder supports the first-degree murder charge. Victoria's acknowledgement of foreknowledge and participation, but not actually strangling or striking Loretta, allows her to plead to second-degree murder instead. The statements also reveal disturbing details about the aftermath. After dumping Loretta's body, Blake and Victoria use her phone to send deceptive text messages to her family and boyfriend. They pretend to be Loretta, hoping to buy time before anyone reports her missing. They use her bank cards to make purchases along their route to Ontario. Security footage from a Tim Hortons captures Blake behind the wheel of Loretta's car, casually using her debit card's tap-and-go feature to pay for food and drinks. They eventually reach Harrow, Ontario, near the American border, where they stay with a friend. They park Loretta's car right outside. When police locate them on February 18, 2014, they still possess her vehicle, bank cards, identification, and phone. They can't explain why they have these items or where Loretta is. The agreed statements of facts provide prosecutors and the judge with everything needed for sentencing. No trial becomes necessary. No jury must deliberate. The defendants admit their guilt completely. Now, Justice Arnold must determine the specific sentences within the legal parameters for first-degree and second-degree murder. The court schedules sentencing for April 28, 2015, just 6 days away. In the interim, Loretta's family prepares victim impact statements. These statements give family members an opportunity to address the court directly, explaining how the murder affected their lives. 15 people prepare statements, including Loretta's mother Miriam, father Clayton, sister Delilah, and other siblings and relatives. The sentencing hearing promises to be emotionally devastating. Family members will finally confront Blake Leggette and Victoria Henneberry face to face. They'll tell these killers exactly what they've lost. And the defendants will have their opportunity to speak, though nothing they say can reverse the damage they've inflicted. When April 28, 2015 arrives, the courtroom becomes the setting for raw, unfiltered grief and rage. The agreed statements of facts presented on April 22, 2015, serve as the closest equivalent to confessions in this case. Unlike many murder investigations where suspects deny involvement until confronted with overwhelming evidence during interrogation, Blake Leggette and Victoria Henneberry provide written admissions of their crimes. However, the path to these confessions involves months of legal strategy, evidence review, and mounting pressure. When police arrest Blake Leggette and Victoria Henneberry in Harrow, Ontario on February 18, 2014, both initially deny any involvement in Loretta's disappearance. They claim Loretta simply loaned them her car. They insist she gave them permission to use her bank cards. They can't explain why she would do this or where she is now, but they maintain their innocence on any criminal wrongdoing beyond borrowing the vehicle. Detectives don't believe them. The circumstances make no logical sense. A pregnant woman doesn't voluntarily give away her car, phone, identification, and bank cards to tenants who owe her rent money, then disappear without contacting anyone. Police charge both suspects with theft initially, a strategic move that allows them to hold the couple in custody while building a stronger case. During those first interrogations in Ontario, investigators from Halifax Regional Police question both suspects separately. They ask about the last time each person saw Loretta. They inquire about the rent dispute. They probe for inconsistencies in the stories. Blake and Victoria stick to their narrative. Loretta loaned them the car. They don't know where she went. Detectives present evidence piece by piece. They show bank records proving someone used Loretta's debit card multiple times after February 13th. They display security footage from Tim Hortons showing Blake behind the wheel, using the tap-and-go feature. They reference text messages sent from Loretta's phone. Each revelation tightens the noose, but both suspects refuse to admit wrongdoing. Then comes February 26, 2014, the discovery of Loretta's body in New Brunswick. Everything changes. Police immediately upgrade the charges to first-degree murder. Now Blake and Victoria face the possibility of life imprisonment with no parole for 25 years if convicted. The reality of their situation crystallizes. After the murder charges, both defendants consult extensively with their lawyers. Terry Shepherd, Blake's attorney, explains the strength of the evidence against his client. The security footage, bank records, possession of Loretta's property, and especially the February 8 video discussing the murder plan make a guilty verdict almost certain. Victoria's lawyer delivers similar news, but prosecutors face their own challenges. First-degree murder requires proving premeditation, planning, and deliberation before the killing. The February 8th video helps establish this, but 5 days elapsed between that conversation and the actual murder. Defense attorneys might argue the killing was spontaneous, triggered by a confrontation over rent rather than a calculated plan. Negotiations begin between prosecutors and defense teams. The Crown offers a deal structure. If Blake pleads guilty to first-degree murder and Victoria pleads guilty to second-degree murder, the court will accept agreed statements of facts that spare Loretta's family from enduring a graphic trial. The sentences remain severe, life imprisonment for both. But the plea arrangement provides certainty and closure. Blake Leggette wrestles with this decision for over a year. He spends time in jail writing those 35 pages of notes discovered by guards, pages discussing a potential book deal and spinning the story into gold. These writings suggest he considers various strategies, perhaps even publicizing the case for profit. But as the trial date approaches in April 2015, reality sets in. No publisher will offer a book deal to someone about to be convicted of murdering a pregnant Indigenous woman, studying violence against Indigenous women. The public relations nightmare alone makes it impossible. Terry Shepherd later reveals that Blake makes the final decision to plead guilty during the days immediately before trial. He's been thinking for a long time now about this day and about this trial, Shepherd explains. It's been weighing on him since February 13, 2014. Blake tells his lawyer he wants to plead guilty to spare Loretta's family the trauma of a public trial. Victoria Henneberry's path to confession follows similar reasoning. She recognizes the evidence against her, proves she knew about the plan, and participated in the crime. However, she negotiates for second-degree murder instead of first-degree. The distinction acknowledges that while she facilitated the killing by distracting Loretta and helped with the cover-up, Blake actually strangled and killed Loretta. The Crown agrees to this structure. When both defendants stand in court on April 22, 2015, to change their pleas, they must verbally admit their guilt. Justice Josh Arnold questions each defendant carefully. He asks Blake if he understands he's pleading guilty to first-degree murder, which carries an automatic life sentence with no parole eligibility for 25 years. Blake confirms he understands. The judge asks if anyone forced or coerced him into this plea. Blake states, "No one forced him. This is his choice." Justice Arnold conducts the same careful questioning with Victoria Henneberry regarding her second-degree murder plea. She confirms she enters this plea freely, understanding it means life imprisonment with parole eligibility after 10 years. The agreed statements of facts both defendants sign represent their full confessions. These documents contain detailed admissions. Blake admits he planned to kill Loretta to avoid paying rent and to steal her car. He confesses to creeping up behind her while Victoria distracted her. He acknowledges choking her, attempting suffocation with plastic bags, and smashing her head against the floor. He admits stuffing her body in a hockey bag, cleaning the apartment, transporting her body, and dumping it along the highway. Victoria admits she knew about the plan beforehand. She confesses to deliberately distracting Loretta so Blake could attack. She acknowledges helping transport the body and participating in the cover-up. She admits using Loretta's bank cards and sending deceptive text messages from Loretta's phone. Neither confession shows genuine remorse. The statements read as cold, factual accounts of actions taken. They describe the murder like a series of tasks completed: attack, kill, clean, transport, dispose, flee. The clinical nature of these confessions disturbs everyone who reads them. With confessions secured through the agreed statements of facts, the case moves to sentencing. There, Blake Leggette and Victoria Henneberry finally speak directly to Loretta's family, offering apologies that ring hollow given the calculated nature of their crimes. April 28, 2015 arrives with heavy emotional weight. The Nova Scotia Supreme Court courtroom fills with Loretta's family members who travelled from Labrador, media representatives, advocates for Indigenous women's rights, and members of the public. Everyone Knows Today brings the formal sentencing of Blake Leggette and Victoria Henneberry. But before Justice Josh Arnold imposes sentences, he allows Loretta's family to speak. 15 victim impact statements get submitted to the court. The most powerful come from Loretta's immediate family, her mother Miriam, father Clayton, and sister Delilah. Each statement provides a window into the devastating ripple effects of Loretta's murder. Miriam Saunders stands first. She clutches her written statement, her hands trembling. She takes deep breaths before beginning to read. "I can't express my pain and my anger about the death of my daughter Loretta," Miriam tells the court. "Everyone always fell in love with her when they met her." Tears stream down her face as she continues. "My pain is something I cannot explain. My pain is some kind of monster tearing apart my body and my heart." Miriam describes how a child should never die before her parents. She explains that her life and her family's life will never be the same. She looks directly at Blake Leggette and Victoria Henneberry as she speaks. Later, she addresses the media outside the courtroom, stating her belief that the couple's apologies simply rehash the family's own victim impact statements, showing no genuine remorse or original thought. Clayton Saunders, Loretta's father, speaks through tears about his daughter's resilience and determination. He describes how Loretta overcame addiction, returned to school, and dedicated herself to making the world better for Indigenous women. "She was going to make a change in things, and she's done a pretty good job in her little short life," Clayton says. His voice breaks as he processes the reality that his daughter's work on missing and murdered Indigenous women cost her own life. When Delilah Saunders approaches the podium, she carries a written statement. But as she begins reading, emotion overwhelms her. She suddenly throws the paper aside and addresses the defendants directly. "Do you know what you've done? Do you know what you've fucking done?" she shouts at Blake and Victoria. "You stole my sister." Delilah's raw anguish fills the courtroom. Before anyone can respond, she storms out, unable to continue. Her outburst captures the rage and grief that formal victim impact statements can't fully express. Delilah later describes Loretta as her best friend and other half, someone she shared everything with. The loss destroys part of her own identity. Other family members, aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings, provide their statements. A common theme emerges across all 15. Loretta's murder doesn't just take her life, it shatters her family's sense of security. It forces them to question the goodness of people. It creates a permanent nightmare they can't wake up from. Several family members describe how they now struggle with trust issues, anxiety, and depression. Some mention relocating because Halifax holds too many painful memories. After the victim impact statements conclude, Blake Leggette receives permission to address the court. He keeps his head down during most of the family statements, avoiding eye contact. When he speaks, his words sound rehearsed and hollow. "I feel the family is always in my prayers," Blake says. "I'm having a hard time dealing with the fact I took a life. I know sorry doesn't reverse what happened. I hope my plea of guilty helps the family in their recovery." Victoria Henneberry also makes a brief statement. She keeps her head in her hands during the victim impact statements. When she speaks, she says, "I'm so sorry and feel incredibly terrible for the pain I've caused you. I know there's nothing I can say to ease your pain. Wrong choices were made, and I hope you can find it to forgive me." However, Loretta's family doesn't believe either apology is sincere. Miriam specifically points out that the defendants' apologies use similar language to the family's own victim impact statements, suggesting they're simply repeating what they heard, rather than expressing genuine remorse. Justice Josh Arnold then delivers his sentencing decision and remarks. He describes Loretta as a bright young woman with a hopeful future ahead of her. He calls her murder despicable, horrifying, and cowardly. He notes that while both defendants pleaded guilty, they remain responsible for causing the Saunders family immense pain and agony. He observes that their actions polluted so many lives. The judge issues the mandatory sentences for murder convictions in Canada. Blake Leggette receives life imprisonment with no eligibility for parole for 25 years on the first-degree murder charge. Since he was arrested on February 18, 2014, his 25-year clock starts from that date. He cannot apply for parole until February 18, 2039, at which point he'll be 50 years old. Even then, parole isn't guaranteed. It's merely the earliest date he can apply. Victoria Henneberry receives life imprisonment with no eligibility for parole for 10 years on the second-degree murder charge. Her clock also starts on February 18, 2014, making her eligible to apply for parole on February 18, 2024. She'll be 38 years old at that point. The courtroom erupts in applause when Justice Arnold announces the sentences. Loretta's family, members clap and embrace each other. While no sentence can bring Loretta back, the lengthy prison terms provide some measure of justice and closure, but the drama doesn't end there. As sheriff's deputies prepare to escort Blake and Victoria from the courtroom, tension explodes. One of Loretta's uncles lunges toward the defendants, shouting threats. Deputies rush in to prevent physical contact. The situation threatens to spiral into chaos. But remarkably, Loretta's own family diffuses it. They surround their angry relative, repeating over and over, "We're here for Loretta, we're here for Loretta." This moment encapsulates the family's approach throughout the ordeal. Despite overwhelming grief and rage, they remain focused on honoring Loretta's memory rather than seeking vigilante justice. After sentencing, both defendants begin serving their life sentences. Blake Leggette goes to a federal maximum security prison. Victoria Henneberry starts her sentence at Nova Institution for Women in Truro, Nova Scotia. However, after a verbal dispute with another inmate, she gets transferred to a prison in Ontario and reclassified as high security. Over several years, she works to lower her security classification back to minimum. In July 2015, Victoria Henneberry files paperwork attempting to appeal her guilty plea. She claims she was distraught, under a great deal of stress and panicked when she entered her plea. She argues she wasn't in the right frame of mind. However, she missed the 30-day appeal window and requests an extension. Loretta Saunders responds publicly. She said she wasn't in the right frame of mind. What frame of mind was she in when she killed Loretta? What frame of mind are my parents in now since that happened? They're not in the right frame of mind either now, and it's thanks to her actions. I don't think that she deserves any kind of pity. The appeal attempt fails, the guilty plea stands. Victoria also begins identifying as American Cherokee during her incarceration, claiming Indigenous heritage on her mother's side. This claim generates significant controversy. The Parole Board of Canada later notes in decisions that she wasn't raised in the culture and has no knowledge of her history. Indigenous communities view her claim as deeply offensive, an attempt to access Indigenous-specific programs and sympathy while serving time for murdering an Indigenous woman. As Victoria's 10-year parole eligibility approaches, she applies for various privileges. In February 2020, she receives approval for a 5-hour escorted pass to attend a session with the Healing of 7 Generations, an Ontario-based organisation offering programs for Indigenous people. Public outcry erupts when this becomes known. The organisation ultimately bans Victoria from accessing their services for the remainder of her sentence. In November 2020, the Parole Board grants Victoria 8 escorted absences from prison to attend programs not offered at her facility. Each trip lasts 90 minutes plus 2.5 hours travel time. These limited passes allow her to begin preparing for eventual parole. In February 2021, Victoria applies for day parole. The Parole Board denies her application. Board members express concerns about her low level of insight and limited acceptance of responsibility. You stated that you now accept full responsibility and acknowledge that you played a significant role in the victim's murder, the board writes. You agreed that you taunted your co-accused, and your challenge to his masculinity was very much a contributing factor to his actions. The board also notes that while Victoria expresses remorse numerous times during the hearing, she shows no emotion. This makes it difficult to determine whether her remorse is sincere or self-serving. It is the board's opinion that you will present an undue risk to society if released, they conclude. In September 2024, Victoria receives approval for a 30-day unescorted absence from prison. She lives in a halfway house, attends programs covering topics like grief, stress management, employment readiness, and trauma support. She volunteers at a food bank and attends a fitness center. The Parole Board warns she still has significant work to do before full parole consideration. The board remains seriously concerned about your low level of insight and limited responsibility for the offense, they write. As of August 2024, the Saunders family submits updated victim impact statements opposing any release. In January 2025, Victoria loses her unescorted leave privileges after further review. She returns to supervised custody as the Parole Board reassesses her risk level. Blake Leggette remains incarcerated at a federal facility. He won't be eligible to apply for parole until 2039. He's received no special privileges or program allowances. His first-degree murder conviction carries the harshest sentence available under Canadian law. Loretta's legacy extends far beyond the courtroom. Her murder becomes a catalyst for national change in Canada. The Yadcha Aminex campaign, started by her cousin Holly Jarrett, successfully pressures the Canadian government to take action on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. After the 2015 election of Justin Trudeau's Liberal government, a national inquiry into MMIWG gets announced. The inquiry officially launches in 2017. In October 2017, Loretta's mother Miriam, father Clayton and sister Delilah testify before the national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls during hearings at Membertou First Nation in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. They share Loretta's story and explain how police treated them differently once they learned Loretta was Indigenous rather than white. Their testimony provides crucial evidence of systemic discrimination within law enforcement. The inquiry publishes its final report in 2019, concluding that the treatment of Indigenous women and girls in Canada amounts to genocide. The IEE report makes 231 recommendations for addressing this crisis. Loretta's case appears prominently throughout the report as an example of both the violence Indigenous women face and the systemic failures that enable it. Loretta Saunders set out to change the world by documenting and analysing violence against Indigenous women. She never imagined she would become part of the very tragedy she studied. Her death at just 26 years old, while pregnant with her first child, represents a profound loss, not just for her family, but for all the Indigenous women and girls she might have helped through her research and future legal career. Yet Loretta's impact extends beyond her death. Her sister Delilah continues her advocacy work until Delilah's own death in September 2021. Delilah testifies at the National Inquiry, writes an opera about MMIWG, shares Loretta's story in schools, and maintains a blog about surviving homicide. Delilah wins Amnesty International's Ambassador of Conscience Award in 2017 for this work. The Loretta Saunders Community Scholarship Fund continues supporting Indigenous students at St Mary's University. Vigils in Loretta's memory take place annually in Happy Valley, Goose Bay and Halifax. In February 2024, on the 10th anniversary of her death, dozens gather to remember not just how Loretta died, but how she lived, with resilience, compassion, intelligence, and determination to make the world better. Blake Leggette remains imprisoned until at least 2039. Victoria Henneberry faces ongoing parole reviews, though she's demonstrated limited insight into her crimes. Loretta's family continues submitting victim impact statements opposing any release. The case reminds us that behind every statistic about missing and murdered Indigenous women stands a real person with dreams, talents, and people who love them. Loretta wanted to be a lawyer. She wanted to be a mother. She wanted to protect other Indigenous women. Instead, she became another name on the list she hoped to shorten. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into cases that demand justice. Loretta Saunders' story reminds us why these cases matter. Drop a comment. What cold case do you think deserves more attention? And share this video so Loretta's story reaches others. Thank you for watching, and remember, justice may be delayed, but it should never be denied.